Hello, how are you? Unfortunately, cancer is one of the most prevalent diseases that exist. And scientific studies have already proven that many people will receive a diagnosis of some type of cancer at some point in their lives. But the good news, which studies have also been able to show us, is that almost half of these cancers could be prevented with lifestyle changes. And we know the extremely important role that diet plays in cancer prevention. Today, I've picked out 4 foods for you that may be related to it. In fact, the last one is something people consume a lot in their daily lives without knowing about its correlation with cancer. So I'm going to tell you how to choose and consume it the right way to protect yourself from this. You need to watch this video, stay until the end because you won't want to miss it. Before we start, I want to ask if you have any personal or family history of cancer. That is, have you ever been diagnosed with cancer at any point in your life? I hope that if this has happened to you, everything is okay now. Or has anyone in your family ever been diagnosed with cancer? Once again, I hope everything turned out well for your family member too, if that was the case. But I want to hear from you. If you can share this information with me here in the comments, how long ago did this happen? And what type of cancer was it? This is super important so I can bring you more scientifically proven information to help you with this. And if you can, please also give the video a like. This shows YouTube that you're interested in this kind of content, and you'll end up getting more videos like this to help you. When we talk about cancer, we're talking about a cell that divides and multiplies in the wrong way. And there are some factors that can really contribute to the growth of this deregulated cell, so to speak. So before we start talking about foods, which is extremely important, we first need to better understand the environment in which cancer tends to thrive and what science has already been able to identify about this in a well-established, evidence-based way. One of the things closely related to excessive cancer growth is excess glucose. Cancer cells use glucose much faster than normal cells do. This is called the Warburg effect. Another important thing that has already been scientifically verified is the relationship between high insulin and elevated IGF-1. These hormones activate cell growth pathways. So in countries with a high prevalence of prediabetes, this ends up being very relevant. Another factor that has already been scientifically proven, and I talk about this a lot in my videos, is chronic inflammation. This inflammation ends up breaking down protective barriers and turning off the apoptosis mechanism, which is that programmed cell death where your body recognizes that this cell here has differentiated incorrectly. This can lead to cancer, but it also kills that cell right there before it starts to grow and multiply, and this is a very important mechanism for our body. And there's also the issue of uncontrolled angiogenesis, where tumors create new blood vessels to, let's say, steal blood, nutrients, oxygen, and a proper diet can interfere with these processes. It can contribute to dysfunction in the immune system, which is something that happens in some people who develop cancer, because this surveillance mechanism of our immune system, responsible for identifying and destroying abnormal cells, can become weakened by certain poor dietary choices over time. The idea here is not to tell you that cancer will necessarily be prevented by diet alone. I wish I could tell you that, but we know that cancer is a highly complex and multifactorial disease. What I'm trying to tell you here is that certain foods can increase your risk of developing cancer. And yes, scientifically, diet is already very much linked to better health and a better prognosis in these cases. The first food on our list that we need to be very careful about consuming in excess is sugar and foods that behave like sugar when we eat them. So, if you are someone who consumes a lot of white bread, white pasta, white rice, cookies, crackers, cake, foods that already have hidden sugars you might not notice, those boxed juices that seem more natural than soda, or even soda itself. All of these, especially ultra-processed foods that are rich in simple carbohydrates, can worsen this situation. Because as I mentioned, when glucose levels rise, the tumor ends up using this quick energy from glucose for itself. This is actual physiology, scientifically proven, because cancer cells consume glucose 10 to 20 times faster than normal cells. Besides that, we already know that when we eat these foods, insulin levels go up, right? Because sugar enters very quickly, glucose enters the bloodstream very quickly. So this activates the growth pathway. Insulin is an anabolic hormone. And this is where the danger lies, because those breast, endometrial, and intestinal tumors have many more insulin and IGF-1 receptors. So this ends up being very important in these specific cases. In addition, we know that inflammation increases because when we have too much sugar in our body, we end up having this glycation effect, which increases inflammation and can lead to more DNA damage for many people. And we also already know that excess sugar can increase metabolic syndrome, weight gain, accumulation of visceral and central abdominal fat, and this excessive weight gain can lead to obesity. And obesity is correlated with an increased risk of more than 13 types of cancer. So it's an issue that is very closely related. When we talk about sugar and weight, about obesity, obviously it's not nitpicking and it's not just for aesthetic reasons. Quite the opposite, we're really talking about health. The second food on our list is meat, but here we have two different groups that science has already been able to prove end up playing different roles. We have fresh red meat, the kind you buy at the butcher shop, and we have processed meat, and they are different in terms of carcinogens. Processed meat, smoked, cured, is in the WHO's category 1 of carcinogens. That is sausage, hot dogs, bacon, ham, bologna, salami. They all increase the risk of colon cancer because they contain nitrites, which can convert into nitrosamines, which are carcinogenic. And there's also the issue of how they're prepared, often at high temperatures, with a lot of saturated fat and a lot of salt. And it ends up displacing fiber from your diet because when you eat a large amount of these foods, you end up not consuming other healthier foods. So ideally, you shouldn't eat these foods or consume as little as possible in your daily life, especially if you already have a personal or family history. There are also fresh red meats, right? In this case, the meat you eat on a daily basis, beef, and so on. And in this case, it falls into category 2A, which is probably carcinogenic. It's not as strong as sausages and cured, smoked, and processed meats, but there's a very important point, which is the maximum recommended amount of consumption, which the WHO indicates should be up to 1 pound, 500 grams per week. I've already made a video here talking more about this because ideally you should reduce your red meat consumption, but you don't necessarily have to cut it out completely. You can choose lean cuts, roast, boil, or stew the meat, avoiding preparations that can increase the risk of carcinogenesis, such as frying at high temperatures, barbecue, because of benzopyrene and other similar issues. Avoiding charring or burning the meat is also very important. And always accompany your meal with fiber, that is salads, leafy greens, beans, vegetables. These will really help to improve this effect, a little bit of the harmful effect of excessive meat consumption. Now, it's really important for us to pay attention to the amount because it's very easy to go over the recommended quantity. There are people who consume 1 pound of meat, 500 grams, at a barbecue in a single day and still eat red meat several more times a week, so this is a very important point to pay attention to. Another food, actually it's not necessarily a food, but people end up consuming it orally. Alcohol is closely linked to carcinogenesis. In fact, it was recently classified as a class 1 carcinogen as well. And we know that, unfortunately, consumption is extremely high. People have this habit of sometimes having a little wine with dinner to relax or a beer at the end of the day to sleep better. This is very problematic. It increases the risk of breast, intestinal, esophageal, liver, mouth, and throat cancers because it turns into acetaldehyde, which is a toxin that damages our DNA, so it can really cause more of these mutations. Nowadays, we already know that there is no safe dose of alcohol to consume. It increases the absorption of other carcinogens, alters the gut microbiota, and can cause vitamin deficiencies such as folate and vitamin B1, which could otherwise have a more protective effect for us. So, as I told you, currently there is no safe dose of alcohol, unlike what was believed some time ago. Ideally, you should try to abstain from alcohol completely, or at least only drink on very special occasions. Now, the fourth food on the list may be surprising to many people who have no idea it could be a carcinogen, and its consumption is very common. It's aflatoxin. You've probably heard about it when we talk about peanuts, corn, and similar products. It can show up in these foods and even in nuts of questionable origin. That's because aflatoxin is a toxin produced by certain fungi that grow on stored foods, especially under conditions of high heat and humidity. And we know that there is a significant amount of trade in these types of products, particularly peanuts, sometimes without strict regulation or proper storage controls. So aflatoxin is specifically linked to liver cancer, and it's a significant health problem. I'm not saying that you need to stop eating peanuts or corn, nothing like that, but ideally, you should always try to buy products that have a quality seal or come from a reliable source because that indicates they were properly cultivated and, most importantly, well stored afterward to reduce the risk of contamination. Because when it's kept in those unsanitary environments, very humid with a lot of moisture, very dark, it's the perfect environment for the fungus to grow. And once the fungus grows, the toxin will be present there. So ideally, you should avoid consuming peanuts sold in bulk without a known origin. You should never eat peanuts that are stale, bitter, or have spots or stains on them. Roasted peanuts will always be safer than raw ones. And you should buy and consume them quickly. Don't buy peanuts and leave them sitting in your cupboard for months. because that also ends up putting them more at risk. Especially if you open them, eat a little, and then store the rest, not properly sealed, for a long time. And also be careful with very cheap peanut products that aren't inspected, because in fact, it can be dangerous to your health. As a bonus for you, I want to leave a very important tip here, which is about fiber consumption, a factor that ends up being greatly neglected by more than half of people. If you stop to pay attention and do a dietary analysis of people, you'll see that they don't even reach half of their daily fiber requirements. This is extremely important because fiber ferments in our intestines. It's the good kind of carbohydrate that helps produce butyrate, which is the main protector against colon cancer, for example. Fiber also increases our healthy gut microbiota, reduces inflammation, and improves insulin sensitivity. So, in a very broad sense, fiber plays a super important and absolutely necessary role. It's also worth reminding ourselves that when we talk about healthy eating, I'm not just talking about carbohydrates, protein, fat, or calories. Nowadays, people focus a lot on that in a very targeted way. We even see some videos on YouTube and other platforms where people say things like, you can, instead of eating a banana, have a spoonful of this dessert. It's the same amount of calories. But is it really just about calorie for calorie? Is that what matters to us? When we think about fiber, antioxidants, vitamins, and minerals, all of that makes perfect sense in relation to inflammation, health, cancer prevention, and so on. So, we have to remember that food is not just carbohydrates, protein, and fat, and that swapping an ultra-processed food for a natural and healthy food with the same calories is not going to be a smart trade for you. So, always keep that in mind. Eventually, you can have a dessert, you can eat a more processed food, at a party, something like that, but the foundation of your diet needs to be as healthy and natural as possible. That will bring you a lot of health. I have many videos here talking more about this, right? No need for radicalism, but just thinking about our lives in the medium and long term. What are you planting for your future, for your old age, and to be healthy? Let me know if you benefited from this video. Which of these foods were you most surprised to learn about their correlation with cancer, and which ones will you avoid or consume more consciously? I would love to see your comment. Remember to like the video. That's very important to me. Share this video with someone you know will enjoy it or with someone who needs it. Let's work together to expand this chain of kindness. That's what I want here with the channel. See you next time. Bye.